Third Act lawyers. We're going to be recording. I hope that's all right with everybody. I'm a member of the Third Act Lawyers Coordinating Committee, and I'm joined in that capacity by Mark Friedman, who'll be handling the tech here and will also be collecting your questions, which we'd ask you to put in the Q&A. Tonight's webinar is about protecting the right to vote, what you can do now. And coming into this, I sort of told myself that we didn't want to just leave you being more worried about the election than you were when you came in. The goal is to steer you towards the worries that you really need to focus on and hopefully give you plenty of things that you can do so you can feel that you're engaged and empowered in this particularly important election season. Third Act, as most of you know, I think is a national organization for people over 60. We try to deal with planetary issues, mostly climate change and democracy. Third Act Lawyers is one of the affinity working groups of Third Act. There are many different affinity working groups. As I said, my name is Ellis Jacobs. I live in Ohio. I'm a lawyer. And I've been involved in election protection work since about 2004. A little bit as a lawyer, but mostly as a citizen who happens to be a lawyer. And every year I tell myself, I'm not doing this again. And then every year it seems to be just obvious that you have to do this work. And this year there's just no escaping it. It's critical work. Everything else we want to work on is contingent upon being able to protect the right to vote this time around. I think all of you know that or you wouldn't be here. Um, in the course of doing that work over those years, I've had the pleasure and the opportunity to work with three groups that I consider to be pillars of the voting rights community in this country. The Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law, the League of Women Voters, and Common Cause. And so we are really lucky to be able to have leaders of all three of those groups here with us today. And we really appreciate them taking the time to be with us because, as you might imagine, they're in great demand. There's a lot going on, and it's a critical time. So let me introduce our speakers. And then this is going to be more of a conversation than your standard just talking and that kind of thing. And then please do put your questions in the Q&A. Katharine Fullenkamp is the election protection legal analyst at the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law. She's one of the people that leads the 1-866 Our Vote hotline, and she's done that since 2020. And she's a substantive law expert in the law of every state. Did I get that right, Katharine?
Well, I cover every state. I wouldn't say I know off the top of my head every state. In fact, we tell our volunteers never give an answer off the top of your head, always look it up. So that
Okay,
applies to me as
good.
well.
And then Chelsey Cartwright is from the League of Women Voters, where she heads up the Truth and Democracy Project. She's the manager of that project. And I'm sure all of us are at least somewhat familiar with the League and the great work that they've been doing for a very long time. Welcome, Chelsey.
Thank you for having me.
Certainly. And Marilyn Carpinteyro, I did it, Marilyn, but not quite in the first time, is the Common Cause Senior Vice President of Strategy and Impact, and she oversees the national election protection efforts of that wonderful group. Thanks for being with us, Marilyn.
Thank you for having us.
Oh, excellent. I'm so glad you guys are here. Like I said, you guys, if your three groups are the groups that at least I've come to rely upon. So to get us started, if you would, each of you tell us a little bit about yourself, the work you do, and your organization, and how we can situate you in the constellation of people doing this kind of work. Katharine, do you want to go first?
Yeah, so Lawyers Committee is a nonpartisan nonprofit organization formed in 1963 at the request of President John F. Kennedy to mobilize the nation's leading lawyers as agents of change in the civil rights movement. Today, the Lawyers Committee marshals the pro bono resources of the bar to achieve racial justice, fighting inside and outside the courts to ensure that Black people and other people of color have the voice, opportunity, and power to make the promises of our democracy real. The Lawyers Committee, as part of the Election Protection Coalition, has established a broad, nationwide, year-round resource, the 866 Our Vote hotline. It's the nation's largest nonpartisan voter helpline. So we provide voters with accurate, up-to-date, fact-based information and assistance that they need to vote successfully and have that vote be counted.
Great. And Chelsey? You want to talk a little bit about the league and your work there?
Sure. Good evening, everyone. I'm Chelsey Cartwright, the Democracy Truth Project Manager at the League. The League has been around for 106 years, so quite the history. Although the League that started was not the League that we know today. There was the history behind the League has evolved, and we're proud that now the League is multiracial and it welcomes all women and all those who are concerned about the right to vote to have a home in the league. So through tools like Vote 411, one-stop shop resource for election information, a trusted source. League members are the eyes and ears of their community. They're trusted messengers in community. We have over 750 different chapters across the country. In the great state of Texas, where I'm from, we've got a mighty league down here. But there are local leagues and state leagues across the country that are doing election protection work along with election observation work, candidate forums, registering voters, you name it. And so the Democracy Truth Project, as part of the Making Democracy Work portfolio at the League, is committed to combating mis and disinformation. We know that we're drinking from a fire hose of mis and disinformation always. And so the project aims to restore trust in our institutions, but more so trust in our civic identity as voters. So we combat mis and disinformation. We build up networks of trusted messengers, and we're promoting the right to vote through that project.
All right. Hey, thank you, Chelsey. And Marilyn?
Hi, yes, good evening, everyone. Marilyn Carpinteyro. I'm thanks for letting us join and crash your party this evening. And so I'm really excited to be talking to you all with the Lawyers Committee and the League of Women Voters because we all work a lot together. And I was last night actually at an event with Selena Stewart, the president of League of Women Voters, because we're all having these conversations on how do we meet this moment and how do we, try to ensure we have a free and fair election this year. Well, not just this year, right? Beyond, right? So Common Cause, we've been around for over 55 years. Some of you may be familiar with the organization, but really the organization is really focused on really core functions of democracy, right? And so we work on courts, we work on voting rights, redistricting, ethics, a host of issues around ensuring that we have a democracy that really works for all. Like the League and like the Lawyers Committee, election protection is such a core function of our work, but election protection for Common Cause means a lot of different pieces of work. It is beyond the poll monitoring, and I look forward to sharing a little bit with you all about the work that's happening across the country to protect our elections, and then what folks can do, even in rural Nebraska, to protect the vote. Because the thing that I want to emphasize the most this evening is that unlike previous elections and unlike previous moments we've had it in times, like every jurisdiction, every state, every city, everything matters in this moment. It is not just Georgia. It is not just Florida. It is not Pennsylvania. They matter. They matter a lot. Louisiana matters. They all matter. But really, this is the year that actually throughout the country, extra ears and eyes on the ground are really going to matter to ensure that we are protecting our elections, because small things that happen in other places are testing grounds of what potentially could happen in other places of the country. So I look forward to chatting with you all and answering any questions. But yeah, thanks.
Excellent. Well, thank you. And thank you for all the work you're doing. So let's start off with the thing that we have to talk about. We wish we didn't have to talk about, and that's the Calais decision and the impact of it and what you're seeing around the country in the effort to push back. And there, maybe we sort of bifurcate the question. One is the places where the impact is being felt like right now, and the places where the impact might be felt soon. What do people need to know? What should they be focused on? What do they need to be thinking about doing? And Katharine, do you want to go first on this one?
Yeah, so just a little background. Calais versus versus Louisiana involved a challenge to a redistricted election map in Louisiana that was drawn with two majority black districts to remedy a violation of Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. The Voting Rights Act is a federal law enacted to protect voters against discriminatory maps and election rules. In the decision, the Supreme Court said that Section 2 violations require a, quote, strong inference of intentional discrimination, not just evidence that a system disadvantages minority voters. This significantly raises the bar for plaintiffs and opens the door for states to push for and defend maps that reduce the power of Black and Brown voters. These are maps that would have previously faced strong legal hurdles. We had already seen an unprecedented wave of mid-decade redistricting in states like Texas, California, North Carolina, Missouri, Ohio, and Florida. After Calais, in just these couple weeks, Alabama, Louisiana, Tennessee, and South Carolina have all joined in, even though primary contests had already begun in some of these states. In Louisiana, the early voting had already started when the Calais decision was released. The congressional primaries there are now going to be held at a later date that they haven't even announced yet. 45,000 early votes had already been cast, including a congressional vote that's now going to be thrown out. The rest of the primaries, with the ballots still containing those congressional races that won't be counted, are this Saturday. And then in Alabama, things have gotten so confusing in places. In Alabama, 4 of the 7 congressional primaries were moved to August, but the others are still taking place on Tuesday along with the rest of the primaries. Imagine being a voter trying to navigate all that.
Wow.
So, as you can imagine, this redistricting race has created a large amount of uncertainty about the whens and wheres for many voters. And seeing headlines about elections canceled or votes won't be counted has made some voters think that the elections are canceled entirely in their states. And then in states like Georgia, there's a lot of confusion about, whether special sessions about redistricting is about the election that's happening on Tuesday or about the 2028 maps. This has really had a large impact. Faith in the voting process has been eroded, and voters are now operating with a mistrust mindset. We're getting calls on the hotline. Even small mistakes and regular confusions make voters think that they're being maliciously targeted. And, voters are increasingly worried about broader intentional disenfranchisement. And this is a big problem because turnout is tied to trust in the democratic process. So, some of the things we're doing at Lawyers Committee, along with our coalition partners, are using every tool at our disposal to protect the voting rights, from litigation and advocacy to our direct work with voters as part of election protection. And I'll say longer term, reform of the Supreme Court needs to be on the table.
Okay. Well, Chelsey, Marilyn, you want to jump in on this? I know that your organizations are engaged in the efforts that are going on right now.
Yes, the league is in coalition with the NAACP, Black Voters Matter, Woke Vote, many different the civic participation, the Civic Participation Roundtable, the Black Civic Participation Roundtable, all of these groups that are in community, in beloved community together to have boots on the ground. On Tuesday, the League of Alabama was at the state capitol. We have the League of Tennessee at the state capitol. Folks are going to testimony. They're voicing their opposition to these maps. And that ties into our election observer work. We encourage folks to observe their local government agencies, their bodies, particularly boards of elections, right? Where decisions are made that impact folks' lives, and understanding that these decisions don't happen in a vacuum, but they're tied into the greater understanding of how democracy functions. So the league is fired up. We will have a presence at All Roads Lead to the South in Montgomery on Saturday. And so we're not taking our foot off the gas here. We know that the vote was bought in blood. We know that our foremothers and forefathers fought with all they had for the right to vote. And in the words of Fannie Lou Hamer, she said, "Even if I die kneeling, I'll die fighting." In fighting for freedom, with all 5 foot 9 inches of her fighting on the road to freedom. So in that same sense, The league is in community with partner orgs. We are taking this very seriously. As Catherine mentioned, we're also filing litigation, and but the boots on the ground. That's where we're mobilizing, and we're activating as many folks to get out and make their voices heard.
Okay, thank you. And Marilyn?
Yeah, I don't have any much more to add on the substantive piece. I think Catherine kind of really laid it out what is going on. I think what is our job as advocates, as those that are engaged in community, is actually to have conversations with more people about what is happening and what they can do. One of the things, as Catherine pointed out, is just as disinformation. We just don't have the megaphone that the other side has in this moment, but we do have is people power, and I feel like that's the biggest thing that actually we need to face it, because we need to actually build more trusted messengers. At Common Cause, part of like the work that both my colleagues have laid out in their organizations, like that is 1,000%. And I think the biggest piece is the mobilization, the building the trust with neighbors and communities about what it is that actually happening, and trying to inoculate the information that they're hearing from other places. Common Cause, we're in over 20 states, and in every congressional district we have members. We have 1.5 million members across the country. We're in every congressional district, and one of the things that we're actually trying to do in response to Calais, and actually, let's be frank, in response to a lot of decisions and executive orders and things, is really like actually bring people together and have the conversation. Okay, what is this? What does it mean? Like, how can you engage? What are the conversations you can have? What are the tools in the toolbox that we have to respond? And really the biggest tool that we have in our collective toolbox is actually organizing, and really like coming back to like how we like start our work. I mean, John Gardner, who started Common Cause, said, everyone's organized by the people, and Common Cause is like, okay, that is where we have to go back to. And that's kind of like what our charge is. And I think you're going to be seeing that, like, it's been going on, but I think what is happening in Louisiana, and like all the things that are going to be happening, as Chelsey said, in the South, that is going to have to be at scale, and it's going to have to be consistent. And the reality is, like, there's going to be a level of accountability. And I get it. I get some people have friendly electeds. I'm in Maryland. I have a friendly elected. But I don't care. Like, I think it's like you have to make it uncomfortable for them to keep doing the things. And to me, the thing that I ask of them is to hold their peers accountable, because that is the piece that's the only thing. It's like they have to make it uncomfortable. We have to make it uncomfortable for them, and they have to make it uncomfortable for their peers that they are seeing day to day. And so I think you're gonna be seeing a lot more engagement, a lot of mobilization. I think the No Kings activities that have been happening, they are going to continue growing. I think the summer is going to be a really big time of activity for organizing, and I think I don't have anything else to add on the substantive piece. I just think it's like, what is the direct actions of activities that we need to be doing to respond? And I think the other thing is building tighter and stronger coalitions at the state level, and really like building like a robust tent in each state, not just of organizations, but of people and communities, because we need to get out of like our verticals, and we need to like actually think bigger. It's like, okay, what is it that we want to achieve? We can't always be reactive. At some point, we could do the reactive, but actually make our own collective demands. And I think you're going to start seeing that in the summer and as we get into the fall. I kind of derailed a little bit, but I'm just like, this is where we are. This is where we are as an organization.
So this weekend, though, I believe that All Roads Lead to the South is happening. Can somebody talk a little bit about that? I've only heard a little bit about that, and I want to know more.
Sure.
Chelsey, do you want to
yeah, sure. I'll jump in. So a network of people-powered organizations, because we know the people united can never be defeated. As Marilyn said, it's about people showing up for values shared across lines of difference, across faith walks. So Black Voters Matter, led by Cliff Albright, Latasha Brown, Woke Vote, the NAACP, Reverend Barber, and the Poor People's Campaign. All these organizations, Divine Nine organizations, faith-based leaders across denominations, will be convening in Montgomery. There will be a a march from across the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma. So that will be a reenactment of Bloody Sunday to ground the activities, and then in Montgomery, a rally at the steps of the state capitol. And so after the rally, there will be an activation village. There will be partner organizations from on the ground organizations across Alabama's Black Belt, across rural Georgia, across Tennessee. The league will be there. We're having many different leagues that will be there as well. And so, to Marilyn's point, the village setting there with the partner groups will plug you into what's happening on the ground, whether that's observing Board of Election meetings, whether that's going to redistricting hearings, never taking the foot off the gas of testifying, holding our elected leaders accountable, and doing this constantly. That drumbeat of we have to start now to be able to build the momentum throughout primary season and through the midterms. We know now that we need the wind in ourselves to be able to do that. And so All Roads Leads to the South will be a powerful convening. And this is just the beginning. As we know, states like South Carolina, more redistricting battles are happening there. They staved off redrawing maps in South Carolina and Mississippi, but we know the South has something to say. So this is going to be a pivotal time in this moment at All Roads Lead to the South. And then obviously, as we go into the summer season, there'll be other activations similar to this. But this is one of many events that will be focused solely on the Calais decision and the impacts of redistricting on Black voters across the South. And I also want to just say something quickly, that the Calais decision also it affects Black voters. It's vandalism, right? It's the gutting of Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, but also this impacts non-Black voters as well. It impacts folks who share our values across party lines, right? It impacts folks who care about the future of our democracy. And so I just want to underscore that everybody has a stake in this, and everybody should see themselves as voters impacted here. And so we need to build that big tent, as Marilyn said, and to be in beloved community with each other to be able to fight forward.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And not to, this is such a critical, inflection point that we could certainly talk about it all night, but I'm going to try to pivot us to talk about other challenges to voting this year that you've seen rear their ugly heads, and what you think about it. I mean, I've read, I'm sure all of us have read articles that list just a litany of possible attacks that are going on, things to be worried about. And I guess I want to know from each of you, what are the things that you're focused on, and that you think really require the attention of well-meaning people, out in the country? What do we need to be tuned into? How would we prioritize all these various threats that we've heard about? We've heard about threats to the right to the mail-in voting, all kinds of stuff. So maybe we start with Marilyn on that.
Yeah, happy to kick it off. I'm not going to go into what the policy, what's the policy and what's the places. I just want to share the high level of where state advocates, where we sit, are actually have the biggest area of concern, in the area that I think that everyday folks can engage in. When we think about election protection, we think about in the context of election day activities. Election day, when we get there, in this current climate, it's too late to address the problem. That doesn't mean that you can't do work. There's critical work that could happen. But the reality is a lot of where we are focusing our time and where actually is the biggest areas of concern is actually in the implementation of our elections, and the election administration components, right? Partly because you are seeing, you're seeing some threats of state voter purges, you're seeing documentary proof of citizenship, you're seeing efforts to curb curbside voting, curb vote by mail. You're seeing all these pieces. who has to implement those things? Who is actually determining whether or not they're going to implement them if there's actually reforms? It's election administration. So it's also safety. So a lot of the work that we're trying to focus on, at least we're fighting the policy at the state legislature. We're trying to fight the policy that is obvious. But I wanted to just like touch in on like an area of work that actually is critically needed, is actually monitoring what is happening with election administrators. Most election administrators care just about ensuring that the elections go on, right? They are there to do the job. They are there to making sure that the machines are working, that people can vote, that they're implementing the pieces of that need to happen. They meet every month. There are public meetings that are happening. They are like having conversations of how many polling places, voting, like the hours, how many early voting sites. They're talking about polling consolidation. They're talking about how they're going to address safety. They're talking about all these things. And from the advocate standpoint, like from our states, common cause states, I'll speak for us, like for us, that is the most critical part of engagement, and to monitor and ask questions. How are you going to deal with having ICE at the polls? Because we all know that is a big thing. So I'm trying to get to where we have the conversations. Like, what are they thinking? How are you going to feel how are you addressing if there's like political violence? What are you addressing if there's like a season of ballots? Like, how are you address? Because they're the ones that are in the thing. And how do we, as allies of election of ensuring elections are secure, are there having the conversations? Because what we're trying to address is making sure that the outcomes of the election are accurate. And what we don't want is that, because people go to them, people who actually are not necessarily well intended will control the narrative, like, oh, this happened at the logic and accuracy test. Logic and accuracy test, I'm sure you all know, like y'all are very well informed. That's like where they actually test the machines. That actually matters. Somebody should be in the room. You don't need to ask questions. You just need to observe what is happening in there. So it's kind of like all these little operations of actually operating the elections for us that we feel we as an organization need to observe and be present to just be able to tell the story of what is actually happening through the process, and also how do we support elected officials. And so I set the polls, documented proof of citizenship, consolidation of polling places, curbing those all are major issues, and those are happening in many different places. One of the places that we can try to mitigate the least amount of harm is actually engaging with election officials. So I just wanted to tie that piece of in, as opposed to like deepen it, like getting into like the policy discussions over like, well, what is Florida doing
Right.
versus what Michigan is doing on documentary proof of citizenship. So
Gotcha.
I just
What
wanted to
you can
kick
be
it off
doing.
there.
Got it. Perfect. Well, Catherine, Chelsey, you want to jump in on the issues you're focused on, and then then we will make sure we talk more about what those of us who want to be helpful can be doing on a day to day.
Yeah, so some of the things we're keeping track of or really focused on is election laws are being changed more frequently and at a faster pace. To give you an idea of the scale of this, states have enacted 236 election-related bills so far this year. That's 66% more than at this point in 2024, and nearly 2.5 times the total from 2022. Most of these are anti-voter, making it harder to vote. With the frequent changes to voting laws and procedures, it's not surprising that there's confusion on all sides, both voters and, like Marilyn mentioned, the poll workers and election administrators themselves. So that's kind of thing one. And then thing two is just how hard it is to get quality information anymore. With the proliferation of AI coupled with deliberate misinformation, it's harder and harder for voters to get that accurate information about the voting process. Voting law varies a lot from state to state and even election year to election year. AI frequently pulls info from the wrong state or wrong year, and so people don't realize that it really can't be relied on. It's giving the most popular answer, not necessarily the right answer.
Yikes.
We're also likely to see an increase in deep fakes and deliberate misinformation, like that fake call from President Biden we saw during the primaries in 24.
Got it. Okay. Well,
Then there's a
Chelsey, that
bunch of
sounds
other
like
stuff we're hearing from voters, but
yeah.
those
Well,
are our top two.
sounds like this is right up your alley, Chelsey. You want to comment
Yes,
on
absolutely.
this?
Yeah, to dovetail on the combating mis and disinformation, we know that this is targeted to communities of color. Back to the 24 election cycle in Ohio, they're eating the cats, they're eating the dogs. That was an attack on immigrant communities, the Haitian community. And so, what I'm doing as part of the Democracy Truth Project is to make critical thinking cool again. How are we emphasizing the need for media literacy? As Catherine mentioned, AI has transformed. That's going to transform the future of our trust as it comes to our democracy and election administration. So, how information moves online, how folks are understanding confirmation bias and understanding how information is put out there to disinformation, I should say, and misinformation is put out there to raise an emotional response and for you to act instead of taking some steps to reflect. And so through this media literacy, we're building those networks of trusted messengers. And we know that league leaders know their communities better than ever. And so that helps to build the infrastructure that we need for election observation, recruitment, for the fight to still register voters at naturalization ceremonies and citizenship ceremonies, and also continuing our efforts around reentry, around voters who are getting their rights to vote restored, and then connected to the election observation piece. I also want to mention how important it is to observe the activities after the election, the audit, the canvassing of ballots, the cure of ballots. That piece, the post-election review piece, is going to be critical for accountability and to really emphasize, okay, there are eyes and ears watching. We want to make sure that everything is done in terms of establishing a process and making sure that things are running smoothly. So just really emphasizing the importance that every year is an election year and that this can't start and stop in the early vote period or on Election Heroes Day or on National Voter Registration Day. It has to be continuous throughout each cycle.
Well, so I think we've teed up this idea that there are things to be doing like today, tomorrow, day after tomorrow. And Marilyn, you already talked a little bit about going and viewing the Board of Elections. And I think we probably need to talk a little bit more about that because that can sound a little daunting. But I think if you want to explain a little bit more, and then I'd like to hear from Katharine and Chelsey, your thoughts on the other things people can be doing. So, Board of Elections, I mean, how do you know when they meet? What do you do when you show up? I mean, what's the deal?
Yeah, and I know Chelsey can also because they also the league also runs a program. So right now, there's an in almost every state there's an election protection coalition that is really like coordinating volunteers around different series of activities based on the needs and uniqueness of their states. In Georgia, they have the Peach Keepers, and Pennsylvania, the Democracy Defenders. Like they have all these different types of groups, of coalitions where they coordinate volunteers to go observe local election meetings. They're trained. Folks are like sign up and they get training to go to observe a meeting, but they're given like a little check form to like what you observe. Some meetings are virtual, some are in person. They happen monthly, and it's really like a reporting system of just being observed, and you're trained to go for just like the monthly meeting. Then there's like then as like Chelsey named, there's also different types of activities on the observation process post-election, observing a recount, so depending on the state programs, they have volunteer lanes to train people to get plugged into different sets of activities. You'll get briefed, you'll be trained, you'll have conversation, there's a point of contact, there's a follow-up. It's not in every state it looks the same. It really just depends on the state program. So if you want to sign up and you're interested in those activities, you sign up to like connect with the state election protection league lead or the League of Women Voters, I know they also have a program doing that things, and you get trained and you're given the materials and a reporting structure that happens, right? And it keeps people connected in some of the work. So
Okay.
that's just a high
Great.
level piece. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. And then Catherine, thoughts on things people can start doing tomorrow?
Yeah, so there's a few things that people can do right now. Especially attorneys can help right now. They can sign up to volunteer for the hotline to make a direct, immediate impact on voters' ability to vote. Our biggest need is really for those leadership volunteers who can support volunteers working with the voters. Those looking for an in-person experience can also sign up for our legal field program. That's led or co-led by the Lawyers Committee. Legal field programs are available in a number of states, including DC, Virginia, Georgia, Florida, and Pennsylvania. So this program places volunteer legal professionals at voting locations to monitor for issues, assist voters, and take declarations from voters as needed. If you're not in the legal profession, there's a lot of ways to help as well. Make sure you know the rules for your own elections. Check your registration and have a plan to vote. Also help spread the word. Please encourage your communities to to vote and to get their voting information from a trusted source like vote411.org or 866-R-VOTE. If they call the hotline, they can talk to a trained volunteer who can help them with all steps of the voting process, from voter registration to, through early vote, vote by mail, through, election day voting, and through ballot cure. And then please also, it's great to encourage people to vote early if their state has an early voting option. That way, if voters do encounter an issue, they can hopefully be resolved in time. And then sign up as a poll worker. Every state has a desperate need for people who can understand and follow the rules that make our elections work.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Chelsey?
And so the league just last year launched a national initiative called Unite and Rise 8.5, which is the how in which we build that bigger tent, how we can build the multiracial inclusive democracy driven by the power of the people. And so if we turn out 8.5 million voters who weren't active in the last presidential election cycle, that can turn the tide. So right now, primary education, voter readiness, and engagement, those are the three key pieces that we're focused on. At this point in May, it's a critical point for voter engagement. As we see primary elections heating up across multiple states, we're focused on making sure that voters have the information and the confidence they need about primary elections and their impact, so that learning and that participating. But right now, what you can do: host Know Before You Go campaigns, educate folks on clear information about registration, deadlines, voting rules, and polling locations. All of that can be found at vote411.org. Excuse me. And then encourage folks in your network to make that voting plan. Prepare for early voting. In person or virtual teach-in workshops. It can show the basics of how primaries function and why they matter. And so organizing those voter engagement pop-up events in high traffic locations, libraries, community centers, community colleges, working with local entrepreneurs or trade schools, farmers markets or fairs to be able to broaden your reach. We really just want to emphasize how much of the relational organizing matters. When you talk to family and friends, encouraging those folks in your network, loved ones, to vote, that really has so much power. And so we're building that pipeline to the midterms that will invite more voters to be engaged and to be connected beyond the primary season.
Okay, and I want to reflect for a moment on the thing Marilyn said, that this is going to be something that needs to be done in a whole lot of places this year where we haven't necessarily done it in the past. And I'll just give you a brief example from my own experience. In 2024, I happen to live about 5 miles south of Springfield, Ohio, and Chelsey mentioned the dogs and cats thing. That's where there's a large Haitian community in Springfield, Ohio. That's where a couple of candidates decided to talk about eating dogs and cats. And so there was a lot of pressure put on that community, a lot of pressure put on the Board of Elections in that community to make sure that, the wrong people aren't voting, right? And so I worked with our local voter protection coalition in the state of Ohio and the NAACP in Springfield, and we kind of pretty quickly set up a voter protection program for Springfield. And I say this because I'm trying to illustrate the fact that you don't have to be doing this forever. And, you can do this. And we started by first going to Board of Elections meetings and meeting the directors and meeting the members of the board and showing them that we were credible people who really just wanted to protect everybody's right to vote. And the strange thing that happened is occasionally in these meetings, just like you said, Marilyn, where there's questions about like we got a directive, what does it mean? And they're asking each other and they don't know. I would pipe up from the audience and believe it or not, they would actually give some credence to what I had to say. Where should the drop boxes be? These kind of simple stuff like that. And then when it came to the questions of how are you going to protect these polling places, we made sure that they took that question seriously and just didn't gloss it over, that they had a plan in place. We discovered, for instance, that there was a street that ran right in front of the largest African American polling place in Springfield that was torn up and was going to make it almost impossible to get to that place to vote on election day. And so we jumped a month ahead of time, jumped on the administration in Springfield. You better get that fixed. And on the day, then we fielded people who were outside of the appropriate polling places to make sure everything was all right and who were driving around the neighborhoods to make sure that there weren't people intent on mischief out in the neighborhoods. And so that's something that happened in the course of just a couple of months in a place where it hadn't happened in quite a while. And I think that's the kind of thing maybe you're talking about, Marilyn, in places where we live, right?
Yeah, I think it's really like, yes, the engagement and the checking in and just following up and see what it is. Because also I think the other piece is like asking them is like, do they have enough poll workers? Like, and they recruit, like, do you need help recruiting? What else do you
Yes.
need? There's like a lot of levels. The other piece I think is really important is ensuring that they're getting public education out sooner rather than later, because a week before is not sufficient time. So also helping them advocate and getting ensuring that they're getting funded from the state and others to put out public information, because it is confusing, because they're trying to get prepared to run elections, and like these things need to come out sooner. And so I think the more that there's engagement and support from the communities, I think that's going to be really, really critical in this time. And I know sometimes it doesn't feel like a lot, but it is a lot, right? I mean, they're being stretched. There is a little things like we all have a level of collective responsibility to ensure that our elections run effectively. On the point, Ellis, that you were talking about the polling places, there's a number of states that are also doing that are working with the National Disability Rights Network to actually ensure that polling places are accessible. So in some states there right now, they have looked at, what are the polling places to ensure, like, is it physically accessible for someone with a disability to actually get there, and like making those recommendations and making sure that they're going to be safe and secure. So some states are running programs like that. Like Florida has been working with the National Disability Rights Network to actually, survey polling places to make sure they are, especially as things are moving.
Now, Mark has been collecting and curating and organizing questions and comments, but before we get to that, let me just ask each of you if you have some closing thoughts, and can you highlight any additional resources or ways for people to plug into volunteer opportunities? And Katharine, you want to go first?
Yeah, so I dropped some information in the chat. So, and I'll send that to the third act group so that in a follow-up so you can see that. But I just want to reiterate, now is the best time to get involved. And also, our volunteers tell us all the time, the best way to manage election anxiety is to do something about it. So get involved. We talk about election season, not just election day. And, this Saturday is an election day. Tuesday is an election day. Early voting is happening somewhere in the country almost every day between now and November 3rd. So don't wait until the fall. find something to do, something that appeals to you, something that sounds fun to you, something that's a community you enjoy, and do it now.
Thank you. Thank you. And Chelsey?
Yes, so I would encourage you all to be intentional and to be urgent in this moment. What we're trying to do at the league is to bring voters in and build something bigger than any one single effort. So, how can we carry this momentum forward that when we reach the midterms, we're a force multiplier? It's by starting now. This moment, we've got to be bold. We've got to take collective action. We have to meet people where they are, right? We've got to build trust at scale. We've got to turn that connection to commitment. We are each other's keeper. And so, visibility, energy, action, that's what will propel us into strengthening this movement person by person. So, showing up together, reaching voters who have been left out, bringing new voices into the process, and making participation feel possible in this moment and urgent in this moment. And so I'll just close by sharing some words from one of my favorite poets, June Jordan. We're the ones we've been waiting for. And so now it's time. No one is coming. The Calvary's not coming. We are the Calvary. So we've got to continue to move forward and onward.
Thank you. And Marilyn?
How do I follow Chelsey after that? Like she gave word, she gave like yeah. So the only thing I would add here is actually getting connected with local organizations as well. You are all part of your own organization, but also like trying to partner with local organizations that are doing work and doing that outreach to building the bigger tent. And so there's a lot of activities happening in every state. And I think if I put a link here for the election protection coalition sign up for poll monitoring and other activities, and that will connect you with like state organizations. It's not one organization, it's a bunch of organizations that are coordinated at the state level to get part of like the volunteer infrastructure. And right now, clearly, it's a lot of the focus is like on election administration work, but a lot of the focus is in the states that are currently dealing with primaries. So I encourage you to try to identify with the organization or engage at the local level with it. The other piece I want to like flag is we are trying to get ready to ensure that we have like an election. We ensure that it's a safe and secure election, right? And it is okay when we're volunteering the work that nothing is happening. It is okay if you are. I want people to like also recognize if things don't happen at a polling place, things don't happen at an election official meeting. If things don't happen, that's wonderful because that's what we want. So I feel sometimes people are like, oh, nothing happened at my polling place. It's nothing. Like I'm wonderful. That's what we want everyone to experience. We do not. Nor should we be having to ensure that we are doing the level of education that needs to happen, the level of engagement that needs to happen, the level of monitoring that needs to happen in this time. And so I just want to like lift people up. Is like when we're recruiting people and talking to people and they're like, oh, but nothing ever happens in my town. That's wonderful that nothing ever happens in town. But you know what? If you weren't there, we wouldn't know that nothing happened in your town. If you weren't showing up, if you weren't looking out, if you weren't doing like, we would not know. And the reality is like every municipality matters. Everything in this moment matters. And so I think it's like getting people to understand like, it's okay if nothing happens, but we know nothing happened in your place, but it still matters to be there. So that's the only thing I would add.
Right. Thanks, Marilyn. And Mark, I think over to you. Have you been able to pull together a few questions or comments?
Yeah, thank you, Ellis, and thank you to all the panelists doing a great job here. I would encourage everyone to take a look at the chat. There's a lot of great resources that the panelists have been putting in. We also are going to send a follow-up communication to everyone who registered, where you will get this information. So how you can specifically plug in, the way to find out what's happening in your state, things like that, which people have been asking about. A couple specific questions. Some of the threats that have been telegraphed are pretty clear that may happen. ICE appearing at polling places to intimidate people, ballot boxes being seized. Are there plans underway now to, proactively prepare for those threats, which, are hiding in plain sight? It's not, we can't wait and see whether those materialize. I think it's fair to say there's a high probability that those things are going to happen. what's being done now, what can be done now by folks on this call, by organizations to proactively deal with that threat. Anyone want to jump on that?
I will say that we do have resources when folks are interested in getting to know the plans of their election officials and the lead up to election day and throughout the early vote period. We have questions that I'll drop in the chat that you can ask about the protection of polling locations, the security and welfare of election officials and poll workers. So we encourage folks to ask those questions ahead of time to build those relationships with their officials to know what the plan is. I'm going to drop those questions in the chat.
So what I'm hearing is that really this is all the proactive work there is happening at the state level, not surprisingly. So the key is to plug into the Board of Elections, things that we've been talking about tonight, and the coalitions in each state that are addressing these threats, and see what the opportunities there are for volunteering. Does that sound right?
When it comes to ice at the poll, sorry, Catherine, you went off mute, so I wasn't sure if you were responding. But on the ice at the polls, a number of states are like actually been putting plans together. Actually, I was trying to find Common Cause Texas did a toolkit for, the do's and don'ts when you see ice at the polls. And I'm trying to like pull it up to put it in there, but every state will have some modified version of what they're doing. I think the biggest and most important thing to do, I would say, is, as we get close to election day, I would like call the hotline, because then what the hotline will do is like the attorneys on the back end will actually put you within will actually try to address it through the coalition infrastructure at the state level, because each state is going to has a different response plan. Some are able to are going to be like responding and working with election officials on the back and like calling like, hey, is it at the polls? They need to be removed. Others will be engaging some engage with law enforcement or some are not. Like it just depends on the jurisdiction. And then there's also, Secretary of States may get engaged, AGs may engage. So it's like every state, given the makeup of what their election, the response is going to be different. So if you see something, the biggest thing is to call the 866-hour vote hotline so that it goes within like the planned response that's happening at that state level. Because some of it's also like, how do you bring de-escalation? Or actually, one, you have to validate whether or not it was true, right? So we would deploy volunteers to go see it. We would deploy legal observers to go observe and track what is happening, not just a volunteer who's actually handing out information, but then also like who within the community that we need to bring together to kind of either de-escalate, work with election officials to try to make sure that the correct information, the issues being addressed, and that once the issue is addressed and it's on top of it, it's like the polling place is still secure for people to come and cast their ballot. So there's like multiple layers of a response if ICE shows up at the polls.
Yes, thanks, Marilyn, for highlighting how the hotline is not just for getting information, it's also for passing on information. So we take those voter reports of agents at the polls, intimidation, long wait times, other kind of obstacles there, document those, and then work with our coalition partners in the states to solve them, including coordinating with election officials or even doing litigation, same-day litigation at times. And so, please do contact us. And we're constantly updating our resources. We have kind of more than 4,000 answers to common questions to voting issues across the country. We provide our volunteers, which are regularly updated. And then we have, emergent issues we write on every day. In fact, I wrote guidance for our volunteers today and posted on our internal website about how to respond to federal agents in the polls, what questions we should be asking, what we need to document, how we need to work with the voters to make sure they're safe as well. So.
Thank you. Just to turn back for a second to Kelly and the earlier discussion, you've got governors now who are basically maybe overriding their state's constitution and engaging in partisan or discriminatory redistricting that may actually be prohibited by the Constitution and could arguably be unlawful. Obviously, litigation is a path to deal with that. Are there other ways? Maybe it's through the mass action, the things that are planned, all roads lead to the south. These things are just raising public protest about what's going on. But are there any other things that can be done to address the tsunami of redistricting that's going on right now beyond the, always somewhat slower than we'd like litigation path?
I think, well, go ahead, Marilyn. I think just showing up in full force in coalition, being there at state capitals, when these committees are meeting, and really not easing up, understanding what's happening on the ground with organizations who are doing this work, who have been doing this work, and tying in as partners there as well. But showing up with the people power front and center.
Mark, I'm seeing
Rachel?
a hand from
Yeah,
Rachel. I don't
Rachel,
know if
you have a question? You have to go off mute.
I think she's muted.
Yeah, you're muted, Rachel. Can you hit unmute on your audio?
Hit it again.
All right, well, let's hope.
We're not getting you.
Okay. Other questions we received. How can we provide support protection for poll workers? Assume that's under the watch of each Secretary of State's office, but some states may be more supportive than others. Are there organizations that are, shining a light on what individual states, are have issues, and this also ties into the issue of some of us who are in states that don't even, Oregon, we're vote by mail, but people want to help outside of a state, and a state that's, largely reliably in one direction. What are the remote opportunities for helping in states outside of your own that you might want to touch on, particularly with respect to things like poll workers or the other issues we've been discussing?
Okay. Can I join? I think I have
Oh, you got
unmuted.
it. You got it, Rachel.
Okay, I think this is a whole different animal. I've been years, like 20 years ago, I was already watching this, and I was watching kind of a timidity. And I think it, 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 we have to educate people that we are not going to be timid this time and wondering what can we get. This is not a law that maybe can wait till next year. This is totally, totally different. And the fact that you can sue, that you can embarrass people who you showed faults to, who did not move, embarrass the heck out of them. This is very different than saying, gee, can we save, X number of frogs and tadpoles this year? And I think we have to educate each other. This is not something that can wait. This has to be done now. That's all I have to say.
Yeah, thank you. I think the urgency of the moment is clear to all of us. So I think it is important that this does not wait till election day, or just the lead up to the election, that people engage now using the resources that have been shared in chat that we'll be sharing with you after the program to find ways and opportunities to plug in locally. States are, elections are largely handled state by state, and locally. So plugging in locally and finding out what the plans are to deal with these threats and how to engage, how to volunteer. All of the great organizations participating tonight have information available on their websites, and on the information sources that have been shared tonight
Okay.
through the chat.
Perfect.
Thanks.
Hey, thank you, Mark, for taking care of all the tech stuff and summarizing the questions. And thank you, Katharine, Chelsey, Marilyn, for lending your expertise and your passion. Hopefully, people learned a lot. They also see that there are some terrific people working on this, that they have the opportunity to join with in this really important work. So please get involved. This is absolutely critical, as I think we all agree. And thank you for taking the time to join with us. Again, thank you to our speakers. And there will be more webinars and more opportunities to be engaged, and we'll look forward to working with all of you.
Thanks for hosting us. Great talking with
Certainly.
everyone.
This is a great conversation. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone.